you as a new chair of the Union.
I also want to give a very special expression of gratitude to the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Moussa Faki, for his 8 years of strong and permanent commitment to multilateralism and impeccable cooperation with the United Nations. Cher Moussa,
Dear Moussa, working with you was a privilege, a pleasure, and an honor.
Excellencies, the partnership between the African Union and the United Nations has never been stronger. Together, we see an Africa booming with hope and possibility. You have a booming, enterprising population, including the largest number of young people in the world. The African continental free trade is poised to turbocharge the region's economy, and calls to address the legacies of colonialism and slavery are growing louder, as reflected in your theme this year, and as reflected in the leadership of so many passionate voices for the liberation of Africa, such as the great Dr. Sam Nujoma of Namibia, whose life we celebrate and whose loss we mourn. The world must never forget that Africa is the victim of 2 colossal and compounded injustices. First, the profound impact of colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade. The roots stretch back centuries, and the bitter fruit continues to affect Africans and people of African descent to this day. Decolonization alone in itself was not a panacea. Political independence did not free countries from structures based on exploitation and decades of economic, social, and institutional underinvestment. It is high time for reparatory justice frameworks to be put in place. Second, Africa was under colonial domination when today's multilateral system was created, and that injustice endures. Look no further than the United Nations Security Council. There is no excuse that Africa still lacks permanent representation in the 21st century. I will keep working with the African Union and all member states to ensure the representation Africa needs and the justice you deserve, including with 2 permanent members of the Security Council. And we will keep pressing together for an international financial architecture that is no longer outdated, dysfunctional, and unfair. Correcting age-old injustices is essential to address here and now challenges. And the good news is that we have many of the solutions we need. Last year, you helped drive that effort at the United Nations with the Pact for the Future. And I thank Africa for its support that was vital to approve the Pact. Our task now is to make those commitments a reality. South Africa's G20 chairmanship could not come at a better time. Let me point to 4 areas for action. First, we must push for peace, security, and alleviating appalling levels of human suffering. Sudan is being torn apart before our eyes and is now home to the world's largest displacement crisis and famine. As we near the holy months of Ramadan, it is time for an immediate cessation of hostilities. And the international community must come together to stop the flow of weapons and the bankrolling of bloodshed. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Congolese people have been suffering yet again from a brutal cycle of violence. And the fighting that is raging in South Kivu as a result of the continuation of the M23 offensive threatens to push the entire region over the precipice. Regional escalation must be avoided at all costs. There is no military solution. The deadlock must end, the dialogue must begin, and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC must be respected. The conclusions of the recent joint EAC-SADC summit offer a way forward, with a renewed call for an immediate ceasefire and new momentum for regional efforts based on the Luanda and Nairobi processes. Now is the time for swift implementation. And you can count on the continued support of the United Nations, including MONUSCO. In the Sahel, the clear and present threat of terrorism is undermining peace, security, and sustainable development. And in Somalia, we are urging predictable funding for the African Union support and stabilization mission, and I hope that our voice will be heard by the Security Council. And as we gather here in Africa, I know all our minds are also very much on Gaza. A resumption of hostilities must be avoided at all costs. The Palestinian people have suffered too much. I welcome efforts by the parties to abide by the ceasefire agreement and urge action for a permanent ceasefire and the release of all hostages. Peace is possible in the Middle East, and that starts with tangible, irreversible, and permanent progress towards the two-state solution, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and security. Excellencies, on all fronts, we stand shoulder to shoulder with the African Union to advance security, stability, human rights, and the rule of law. Excellencies, second, we must keep working together to deliver the AU 2063 agenda and the 2030 agenda for sustainable development and drive action on finance. African countries pay up to 8 times more to borrow than developed countries, and 20 are in or at risk of debt distress. The Pact for the Future supports an international financial architecture reform to reflect today's economy, ensuring fair representation and urging effective action on debt relief. And I will stand with Africa as a matter of justice and to right the historic wrongs. Excellencies, third, the climate crisis. Climate disasters are tearing across Africa, destroying lives, upending livelihoods, devastating economies, and inflaming conflict. At the same time, the renewables revolution is unstoppable, and Africa is poised to become a global clean energy powerhouse. Yet, today, Africa receives just 2% of global renewables investment. Realizing Africa's potential requires access to affordable finance, including by implementing the COP29 finance decision fully and on time, and supporting development of a roadmap to realize $1.3 trillion a year. Excellencies, Africa has contributed little to the climate crisis, yet is paying the price with record droughts, floods, and heat. Climate justice requires a massive investment in adaptation, with the international community bearing an enormous responsibility. Developed countries must double adaptation finance, and countries must significantly boost the loss and damage fund. Allow me a note. When the loss and damage fund was created, the pledging conference that took place has allowed for an amount that is equivalent at the highest contract for a basketball player in the United States. It is absolutely necessary to make the Loss and Damage Fund an effective instrument to support developing countries in adaptation. And we also need justice when it comes to your abundant critical minerals. Too often, your countries are plundered, bound to the bottom of value chains as others grow rich on your resources. The work of the United Nations Panel on Critical Energy Transition Minerals is designed to help embed justice, sustainability, and human rights across the value chain. Africa's minerals must benefit Africa's people.
Excellencies, finally, we need to act on the new technologies, including artificial intelligence. Almost 2/3 of all Africans have no reliable internet access. We have a historic responsibility to ensure AI benefits humanity, not just a privilege for few. The Global Digital Pact shares the ambitions of the African Digital Compact: universal connectivity, capacity building, and responsible AI governance. I will share a model on capacity building so as to assist the Global South to use AI for the common good. Together, let's ensure these commitments are honored. Excellencies, the United Nations and the African Union stand united in our determination to deliver justice for your continent, leaving no one behind. We have much to build upon, so together, let's make commitments reality. And once again, let me say something in my mother tongue and say with one voice, Viva Africa.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. We highly appreciate your leadership in strengthening the African Union-United Nations partnership. Thank you. السيدات والسادة.
Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, I'm very happy and honored to welcome today His
تفضلوا مشكورين بإلقاء كلمتكم.
of the State of Palestine. You have the floor, Excellency. Excellency Mohammed Wild al-Ghazwani, President of the Republic of Mauritania and the Chairperson of the African Union. Excellency Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Mr. Abiy Ahmed. Excellency Musa Faki, Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Excellency Mr. Antonio Guiterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you. At the outset, I wish to extend our congratulations to Excellency President João Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola, for becoming the chairperson of the African Union for the year 2025. We wish him full success. We extend our thanks to His Excellency President Mohammed Ould El Ghazouani for his chairmanship of the previous session of the African Union. I'm very happy to meet once again with you, and on behalf of the Palestinian people, who have a great deal of esteem to the people and the leaders of African states. We are proud of our friendship with them. They have always provided to us a faithful support to our just struggle for freedom and independence. Heads of state and delegation, at the time when we are working with countries in the world and international organizations to consolidate the ceasefire and provide more humanitarian assistance, and at a time when the state of Palestine is fulfilling its mission in the Gaza Strip to assist the refugees and to go back to their areas and to provide the living conditions for our people, and to, as we are preparing for the reconstruction, we hear calls for deporting our people from their lands and affecting the sovereignty of other countries. These calls are meant to distract the world from the war crimes and the genocide and the destruction in Gaza, in addition to the crimes of colonization and the settlers grab land and annexation, in addition to attacks against holy shrines in the occupied territories and Jerusalem. These are carried out by the forces of occupation and the gangs of settlers. The aim is to destroy the possibility of a two-state solution for the Palestinian cause. Today, more than 2,300,000 people live in Gaza, including 1,500,000 refugees, 1,500,000 refugees who were forced to leave their country in 1948. They suffered from more than 50 massacres by the terrorist Zionist gangs. The only place they can go back to is their cities and villages from which they were expelled during the Nakba. In implementation of UN Resolution 194, which calls for the return of Palestinian refugees to the cities and the villages from which they were deported, and that they would be compensated for the harm they suffered. We reaffirm our complete rejection for all the calls aimed at deporting the Palestinian people from its land. This will keep the region in the cycle of violence instead of going to peace creation. It is an illusion for people to believe that they can have a new century agreement or to deport our people by occupying our land. In this regard, we hail the positions of the countries that rejected the calls for deporting our people from their land and stood by our side to defend their rights. We highly hail the position of the African Union and its member states in this regard. The Israeli colonial practices mean that we need to have an urgent action by the international community and the Security Council before the forces of radicalism disseminate to kill the two-state solution. Heads of state and delegation, the Palestinian cause is the cause of a people seeking freedom and independence. Our commitment to international legality and the signed agreements, including the implementation of the vision based on a two-state solution, mean that we need to end the Israeli occupation that occupies with military power the land of the state of Palestine and its Al-Quds, the eastern part of Al-Quds. There is the UN Resolution 338, also UN Resolution 242, and the Arab Peace Initiative, whose aim is to enable the people of the region to live in peace and security. All of this in implementation of the consultative opinion of the International Court of Justice, which has stipulated the illegality of occupation and that it should be ended in 12 months. This was decided by the International Court of Justice. There's also the decision by the UN General Assembly and the call for a conference that will take place in Geneva next month. I call upon the AU member states on this occasion to participate in this important conference. Heads of government and delegation, the achievement of peace and security requires from all of us to effectively participate in the global alliance to implement the two-state solution and to support the international conference for peace that will take place in the United Nations by the middle of next June. Under the dual chairmanship of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and France. This will be an opportunity to mobilize international resources for the international recognition of the State of Palestine and to obtain our full membership in the United Nations. We have not been able to achieve this because of the vetoes of the United States. Our aim is to implement the two-state solution based on international legality. The holding of the AU summit and the theme of justice through compensation reflects your authentic commitment to justice as a universal human value. It is a commitment whose echoes are seen in your continuous support to the Palestinian people who are still suffering from the last form of colonization in the world. We are the only ones living under colonization. You lived under this colonization, but you were liberated. Finally, we reiterate our thanks to the African Union and the member states for their continued support to the struggle of the Palestinian people to cherish their freedom and independence. And we wish your summit full success and more prosperity for the African people and their free peoples. Thank you very much for your attention.
شكرا.
Thank you, Excellency President of the State of Palestine, Abu Mazen, for your statement, your participation. Mr. President confirms the continued support of the African Union to the Palestinian cause, support in full support.
We invite His Excellency Muhammad